This is Pat's Probe. That's right. We're probing the Pats on the Ourlads Football Network as New England drops their first game for 2020, but it was a beauty as the Seattle Seahawks hold on in a one play situation at the end of the game. Cam Newton stopped within the 1 yard line, and that does it for New England's undefeated season, Evan. But it was interesting because I was reading your 10 Things article, and in the beginning of it, you said exactly the way that I felt, which was, even though the Patriots won last week and lost this week's game was much more impressive.
I agree, and I think it really starts with Cam throwing the football down the field. This was an elite deep passing game for Russell Wilson, certainly, but definitely a good one for Cam as well. In the opening week of the season against Miami, and certainly some of this was just game script and game plan. They obviously ran the football 42 times, but Cam also only threw 4 passes beyond 10 yards, just 4. In this game, he threw 20. So a much bigger difference in the game plan, or at least in the game script and the flow of things. You had 15 for 20 on those throws for 295 yards. He had a couple of big ones to Julian Edelman. He had a few nice ones to N'Keal Harry on the final drive. So making plays down the field, using his legs to extend plays in the pocket and then make throws down the field, keeping things alive, keeping things lively down the field on those deep balls. A lot of those things I think were things that a lot of people were concerned about. What was this Patriots offense going to do when they are down by 10 points, 11 points like they were last night, and they had to throw their way back in the game? Were they capable of doing that? And last night we saw that they were, and really they just came up a yard short from kind of proving to everybody on the Sunday Night Football stage that Cam is all the way back. He is all the way back physically. I think we can see that both with his legs and with his arm. And the Patriots are going to be a really fun team to watch, I think, moving forward as a result.
Yeah, and really that is all now it's going to be about what Cam Newton is keeping him healthy. And if Cam Newton is a healthy quarterback, this is a Super Bowl contending football team. There's still a lot of young players that the team is banking on, and those young players you would hope would continue to develop early in the season to later in the season. They'll be in a lot of big games. And then you take your chances in the postseason and see what you got. And Cam Newton is still a special quarterback, and it's great for the NFL. It's great for the Patriots. But yeah, they just got to keep him healthy.
Exactly. And a big way to keep him healthy is over the last 2 weeks, he's been only pressured about 19% of his dropbacks. So that offensive line, especially the interior of the offensive line, Joe Tooney, Shaq Mason, and David Andrews, have done an excellent job of keeping Cam's lap clean and allowing him to step up and move around the pocket and not take as many hits when he's not scrambling or running with the football. So that's how you keep a quarterback healthy, is you have a good offensive line in front of him, and the Patriots certainly have that. So they have all the pieces on offense, especially when you put in there that Josh McDaniels is really good at knowing how to utilize strengths of his playmakers and of his quarterback. So this whole offense, even though last night looked a little bit more like the Brady offense throwing the ball down the field, it still has a lot of Cam wrinkles in there. We saw some RPOs, we saw a lot of play action. So there's a lot of things going on there schematically in terms of the numbers advantages and the angles that they can attack the defense at, and putting defenders at the second level and the first level of the defense in constant conflict. Is Cam going to keep it? Is he going to hand it off? Is he going to throw it? Every single play is sort of roll the dice for the defense right now. Whereas with Brady, especially I think in 2019, things became extremely predictable towards the end of his career here in New England, and everybody kind of knew situationally this is a run or this is a pass. And now with Cam, there's a lot more deceptiveness and a lot more disguising going on for New England.
Yeah, and look, it's the other thing when you take a look at the personnel, because you know what you have in Edelman, but they're not really getting anything out of the tight end position, and we know that. That's not a surprise as far as in the passing game. But Harry is that one player that we've talked about that has to take that next step. You believe we are seeing some baby steps from Harry. At least it didn't look like he had like any bonehead plays like week one, so that's a good step. But whether or not he could take that other step and be a player that can be counted on week in and week out to get those 5 to 7 minimum receptions, 60 to 90 yards, and throwing a touchdown every couple of weeks, that's still yet to be seen, but that's what the Patriots need.
Exactly. And there's a ton of pressure on N'Keal Harry to be that guy, because you look around the room and they do have Devin Asiasi, a rookie tight end, who I think is going to come along eventually. It's tough playing tight end in the Patriots system on offense is probably the second hardest position to play outside a quarterback because there's just so many responsibilities in terms of the running game and the passing game that a tight end needs to learn. So Ryan Izzo, their starting tight end, played 97% of the snaps on Sunday night for that reason, because they really feel like he's the only one right now that knows what he's doing out there.
And
So
he did
I
it
think
in week 1 too.
Exactly. So I think later on in the year we'll see a little bit more out of the rookies. Asiasi Keen's been banged up. Hopefully he gets back to healthy in participating fully in practice, so he can hopefully make an impact here eventually. But back to Harry, I think what we saw last night, he had 8 catches for 72 yards. 3 of them came on that final drive where he really was the reason why they got down there, more or less. And he had that one catch right at the end of the game that got them down to the 1 yard line. Those were all great signs that not only was Cam trusting him in those big moments, but Harry was actually making plays in those big moments. And the one difference in his usage, I would say, from this week to last week, and especially from this year to last year, his rookie season, is that he's being used a little bit more in the slot now than just on the outside. So 40% of his routes came from the slot last night. 6 of his 8 catches came from inside. And as a 6'3" receiver, he has gotten a lot of comparisons early on in his career to an Anquan Bolden type, somebody that's going to be more a guy that's going to threaten middle of the field coverage, get mismatches for him against linebackers and safeties between the numbers, and allow him to use his size almost like a tight end would,
Yeah.
right? Coming up the seam of the field, coming across the field. And that's exactly what we saw out of him towards the end of last night's game. And that's a lot of his production, that 8 for 72, came from in Sunday night's game. So that to me is a great sign. The one step that I think we're still waiting for him to do is break a tackle in the open field and actually make a big play out of some of these scheme touches that they get him the ball in his hands. You know, the screen passes, the swing passes behind the line of scrimmage, the slide routes out the backside of the formation. Those are all plays designed to get Harry one-on-one in space against a defender, where he's only got to make one guy miss and then he can create a big play from there. So far, he's only broken 1 tackle on all of his touches to start the season, and that's not really the player that they drafted. Nope. They were expecting a guy that was going to be able to create big time as a ball carrier, and he did that as a rookie, and so for some reason, he's kind of taken a step back in that regard in year 2. So getting back to being that guy that we saw at Arizona State, you know, take screen passes to the house and reverse field and make 5, 6 defenders miss on one play. That's what the Patriots need out of Nick.
Does he have to get physically bigger? Does he just have to bulk up more? What do you think the deal is there?
I think with he did slim down in the offseason a little bit, and the idea there was to be a little bit faster, be a little bit lighter on his feet and more explosive, because he was playing close to 230 in his rookie season. He was just too heavy. You know, you could see it. He was just kind of lagging around, and he was just too heavy. So they got him down now to about 215, 220, and he feels slimmer. He feels faster. I think that's more important probably than packing on the pounds to be more physical. But the difference is right now is that moving laterally and getting those jump cuts and slithering out of tackles has really been a struggle for him. He needs to be a guy, and this has also been sort of an issue, that just kind of lowers his pads and runs right through people, because he's not going to be Julian Edelman. He's not going to be this little scat back that dances in and out at that size. So I think that what he has to be able to do is be physical, and that's sort of the next step for him to learn that skill, because in his rookie season, he was one of the best ball carriers in the league on things like end arounds and jet sweeps and things like that they designed to get the ball in his hands. He was picking up yards after contact left and right, but now all of a sudden he's becoming a better downfield route runner, but he's taking a step back ball carrying. So it's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back with him right now.
It's good to see Byrd get in on some action too, because that's a player that we talked about in the offseason leading up until this new season, that this was one of those receivers that was going to have to step up after, it's not like he put up huge numbers last year, but they were career highs. He had a big year last year for Byrd, and he's been right now on the field. He's the one receiver that is getting the most playing time.
It's crazy. And I think the biggest thing that you see with Byrd is a combination of 2 things. One, he has that history with Cam Newton in Carolina. I think you're seeing him lean heavily on that. They have a pretty good rapport. There was some throws last night. Obviously, the interception was intended for Byrd, and that was a bad one. But there's a one throw against Seattle in particular where Byrd didn't even break out of his route yet. He hadn't even turned back to look for the ball, and he turned around and the ball was already in his chest. And those are the types of anticipation type throws, anticipatory throws that you love to see from quarterback and receiver. So that really stood out with Bird. I think in camp, this definitely was the case against a really good secondary, obviously in New England. But he's not necessarily the guy that's going to be a blazing deep threat. I don't think that he's certainly not Tyreek Hill fast. He's not DK Metcalf explosive either. He's kind of more like a Philip Dorsett, which is what the Patriots have had over the last couple of seasons, where he's more of an intermediate threat than a deep threat, and he uses his speed and he uses his burst off the line of scrimmage to set up those comebackers, to set up those out routes along the sideline, and to set things up by making those defensive backs respect his speed and then kind of cutting their route off. And I didn't see him in camp, and I haven't really seen him in the games yet truly separate over the top by just running past somebody. And I don't know if he's actually that guy, but if he can be that chain mover, that intermediate guy that gives them something on the boundary, something on the perimeter to respect, then they'll take that.
All right, a couple more things on offense, and we'll turn over to defense. But James White, unfortunate personal tragedy in his life. And he continues to be, of course, a big part of this offense, as we saw week one. Rex Burkhead looked like the running back that definitely took the majority of this. Did that surprise you that Burkhead was the guy that really got the majority of the snaps over Michel? Do you think that was just a product of the way the game was, more of a passing game than a running game? And what is the situation with White in general moving forward?
It's a tricky situation because obviously when that type of tragedy hits somebody, you don't want to think about football
Sure.
right now, right? You don't want to rush him back on the field just because they need him. There's bigger things than the game at that point. So I'm sure Belichick, for all the things that he gets flack for from people about his attitude and about his, gruff demeanor at times, he is a human that really understands his players and understands, sort of that line between real life and football. So I'm sure he'll give James White plenty of time. But to answer your question about Burkhead and Michel, I think the biggest reason why Burkhead played the most was probably the game script. Got into a position where the Patriots were down double digits there in the third quarter into the fourth quarter, and they needed a pass catching back to really threaten those underneath zones. Seattle's a big zone coverage team. They played a ton of zone again last night, cover 3/4 coverage, where they take a fourth of the field. And those underneath zones are usually occupied by linebackers, and you get those running backs on linebackers in space. And that's how the Patriots have always kind of thrived, passing to guys like James White or Shane Vereen or Danny Woodhead or Kevin Falk and go right on down the line. So that's what they did again last night with Burkhead. In terms of Michel, I watched a lot of his carries back today. A lot of them came in the first quarter, and I just am really getting kind of demoralized about what I'm seeing out of Sony, because the biggest thing that you see with him right now is that he is caught flat-footed, heavy-footed in the hole a lot, and he's not the type of guy that should be sitting in the hole and trying to dance out of tackles, right? You want him to get north-south and just get downhill as quickly as possible. Last night, there were a couple of opportunities and a couple of openings that presented themselves, and he just kind of hung out in the hole for a little bit too long, and they ended up collapsing in on him. If he can just kind of burst through the line of scrimmage and get to that second and third level quickly, then I think there were opportunities and yards to be had for him early on in that game. So not his best game, certainly. Burkhead definitely a little bit more about the script. I think this is all pointing signs to the guy that I pointed out to you, Greg, in training camp, though. When Damian Harris comes back in week 4, he's going to play, and I think that he's going to be probably their best all-around back by the end of the season.
And because you look at it, the outside of Cam Newton, the running backs for the Patriots had 14 carries for 20 yards. So
yeah, it wasn't a good running game, and Seattle basically came into the game and said, we're not going to let you do what you did against Miami. We're going to force the ball into Cam's hands. We're going to make him throw the football down the field and beat us that way. But that is, I think, part of it, I think, is really game plan. And that was sort of what Belichick said last week when everybody asked, are you going to let Cam run it 15 times? Are you going to let Cam run it 15 times? And he kept on saying, well, some weeks we might, some weeks we might not. Kind of depends on what the defense does. So that's what happened last night. They got behind as well. So that's a big part of it too. But I don't think that what you saw last night was necessarily the type of running game that you'll see moving forward, because Seattle seemed very prepared for it, and they have a lot of really aggressive run defenders, Adams, Bobby Wagner, that really attack the line of scrimmage and make it difficult.
One more thing, and that is Josh McDaniels on third down and medium to long, And you don't see it a lot in the NFL when the coordinator decides, I'm gonna try to run it here, uh, let alone do it 3 times in the same game, including from 3rd and 8. Now, being a Patriot fan and following this team for as long as you have, and I've seen McDaniels have success doing this because I've watched enough Patriot games. Is that I haven't looked at the statistics, but over the years, do the statistics tell you that he stands a decent chance of converting those calls, or was it something else and this was overkill?
I honestly thought that this a lot of people in New England today, just listening to sports radio, reading my fellow beat writers, and what everybody's talking about is that final sequence, right? Him, Belichick not calling a timeout at the end of the game and kind of saving that timeout, and then obviously the final play call, was it too predictable?
That's
What could
true.
they have
Yeah.
done something differently, right? That's been the big narrative. But to me, not opening up the passing game sooner, going and run on 3rd and 8, going run on 3rd and 4. They ran a jet sweep to Rex Burkhead that got absolutely blown up on a 3rd and medium as well. They went screen, screen, speed option on 3rd down, and they went nowhere, and they ended up punting the football. Those types of decisions to not open it up sooner in a day where it was clear that Cam was going to have some opportunities to throw the ball down the field. He might have thrown for 500 yards if
Yeah.
the Patriots had opened this up sooner. So that was the biggest thing to me. Out of everything, the game script went the way it went in a lot of ways because the Patriots were so conservative with their play calling on offense. I don't think that they're in that deficit late in the fourth quarter if they were able to kind of throw the ball better and throw the ball more early on in the game. So that was a big detriment to me from McDaniels, who's been awesome, play calling wise, but also just schematically, like the way that he attacks angles and uses Cam's
Mhm.
strengths to his advantage, and being able to get the numbers in the box in their favor, and all those types of things that he's done to really prop up a skill position group that's not very good and make Cam functional in this offense in a short period of time has been tremendous work. But the situational play calling, I think sometimes McDaniels gets a little too cute, a little too conservative. Last night there was one play where he ran power read with Cam and on a 3rd and medium that they were pretty backed up. So maybe they just didn't want to throw inside their own 20 and they just kind of wanted to play field position there. But ultimately, every single time the Patriots run the ball on 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7 or whatever it is, it's a gift to the defense, right?
Oh,
You're just
absolutely.
conceding
Yeah.
it and you're saying you're
Yep.
punting. So that is a really frustrating thing to
Were you
watch.
surprised that he gave Falk the opportunity to kick that 54-yarder?
That was the sequence with the jet sweep right before it. So they ran that little pop pass to Rex Burkhead that got completely blown up by Jamal Adams in the backfield. And then after they ran that play, they had Folk run out there for a 51-yard field goal that everyone knew he wasn't going to make. So it was kind of two decisions in a row. First to run the football gimmickly too with that little pop pass jet sweep action, and then secondly to just trust a kicker that has been very shaky with a long kick there. Those were two very highly questionable decisions to me,
And
definitely.
and by the way, the call at the end of the game, I mean, that's the call you have to make. And I also think that look, that's the one maybe concern that the Patriots are going to have moving forward. Who else, unless it's Damian Harris, who else can get the ball in the end zone? What's the best way for us to get the ball in the end zone once we get inside the 5, inside the 3, inside the 2? Because there's no Gronk. The tight ends are not really going to come into play here. They don't have, unless Harry develops into that player, they don't have those type of weapons. The big bodied guys, Harry's the only one. So you're going to go with really what you have. And even though everybody knew it was coming, that's the call you have to make. And that's something that we're going to see the Patriots do a lot of unless they figure out a way or if someone steps up and gives them another weapon in the red zone.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. But the one thing that's so cool about this offense right now, currently, is that Josh McDaniels has developed counters or built counters off of some of these run actions with Cam. They ran earlier in the game, they ran that same quarterback power concept, and he ended up throwing that touchdown to Jakob Johnson off of that little play action fake. Those are the types of things that are going to have to continue
Yep.
for McDaniels, is he's going to have to keep spinning that dial, right? And I think at the end of the game last night, listen, it's 11 on 11. It's my guys against your guys. If you block it up, I don't care. Everybody in the world can know that Cam's getting the ball there. If the offensive line does its job and blocks all the holes, then they're going to still get that yard, right? And that's a big thing about football is that you can be predictable to a degree and you can know everybody in the stadium. Well, there weren't a lot of people in the stadium, but all 22 people on the field and everybody watching at home knew that that ball was going to Cam. But if you get the push that you need from the offensive line, it doesn't matter if everybody knows it's coming. So that was an execution thing to me more than it was a play calling thing. But I do want to see the Patriots continue to build off of those counters, off of the things that they do well. Now they have established that power read and the QB power scheme that we saw at the end of the game on Sunday night, that is a really effective call for them. That's a really effective scheme for them. So now they're going to have to figure out, okay, when the defense sells out like the Seahawks did on the goal line last night, what do we do off of that? What's the complement that we can build off of that? They've already shown one with the Jakob Johnson touchdown. Hopefully McDaniels has a few more tricks up his sleeve.
And look, if you think about it, there were 3 plays that I thought were really big for New England if they would have won the game. You had the gift pick six. You had the pick six that wasn't when Dunbar let the ball out of his hand. So you had a swing there, even though Seattle scored on that possession. So sometimes you can overlook that when they got the ball right back. And then was Russell Wilson throwing a 40-yard pass down the field on 3rd and 1. And Russell's done that before. We've seen Russell Wilson do that a lot, where he just decides, I'm chucking the ball. And you know what? Just like Josh McDaniels, and why do I do this? Russell Wilson makes those decisions because he's been successful making those decisions before. But that was a play that Russell Wilson might have wanted back if New England would have won that football game. Is what are you doing? Throwing the ball 40 yards down the field, and not even to one of your better players when all you had to do was get a yard.
Yeah, and earlier on in that drive too, Chris Carson thought he was being smart by sliding down.
Yes, I was like, I'm surprised he didn't turn it up the field. Yeah.
Yeah, that was not the right move by Chris Carson because he actually wasted a play by doing that because the clock trickled down to the 2-minute warning. So in a lot of ways, the Seattle kind of handed the Patriots the game there at the end. There was a couple of decisions, a lot of penalties by the Seahawks, certainly that killed drive their offense as well. I think if you take out all the penalties, they're probably over 40 points in this game. And that was definitely a case of leaving the door open for the Pats. And they almost took it. They almost were able to take advantage of it, but it was just a little bit too much Wilson. And I watched the game back this morning, and Bill Belichick said it today in his press conference this afternoon with the media. About 3 or 4 of those touchdown passes, there's a guy in his face. There's coverage all over the receiver. What are you going to do?
No, that's right.
It's perfect placement. It's a great catch on the other end, and sort of you got to tip your cap sometimes to those types of plays. And I think that's what the Patriots chalked a lot of those touchdown passes last night up to with Russell Wilson. The DK Metcalf one and the David Moore one in particular were just incredible individual plays by both of the quarterback and receiver, and just kind of good coverage can't always beat the offense, and that's a lot of what happened with the Pats defense last night. Although there were a lot of bad things too that we can discuss.
And Russell still, I mean, I've said it for the past year. He's the best quarterback in the NFL.
He's a magician. I mean, some of those throws, the one to Metcalf in particular, Winovich actually got free off the left side and hit him as he threw the ball, and he was still able to loft it up with the perfect amount of velocity and touch and drop it in the bucket to Metcalf with Gilmore all over him in coverage. And the finish with Metcalf playing through the contact and being able to stave off Gilmore was impressive. But those throws, in particular, the Moore one, the Metcalf one, and then the Chris Carson touchdown with Winovich in his face again, throwing off his back foot and just kind of lofting it up there perfectly. He, to me right now, I agree, is playing like the best quarterback in the league.
This was my pick to represent the NFC, and now I have more confidence that's going to happen as long as Seattle can get some of their – they got a couple of young defenders that need to start playing, and they also have some injured defenders that need to get healthy, even though Irvin looks like he's out for the year now. And Blair, you're going to find out probably at the press conference today what his injury situation is. But offensively, by far, the best offense Russell Wilson has ever had because he has big receivers, fast receivers. He's got a really good running back. He has a decent offensive line. It's by far, I mean, he's got all the tight ends he needs. Offensively, everybody's healthy. This is the best offense I think he's ever had.
Yeah, and to appease my fellow nerds out there, the play calling for Seattle has been super aggressive through the first 2 weeks of the season, particularly on first and second down. I believe they actually lead the league in pass frequency now on first and second down, which is unheard of for Pete Carroll. Usually he's a very let's establish the run, conservative play caller, especially early on in games. He really wants to establish that running game and run the football a lot. And they did run the football and pass it about even last night, but the willingness to allow Russell to control the game and the willingness to allow Russell to be aggressive and throw the ball down the field as often as he has through the first 2 weeks was not something that Pete Carroll has been known for. So this is a total kind of philosophy change, I would say, for the Seahawks coaching staff, where they finally are realizing they have the best
That's
quarterback
right.
in football right now, and we need to ride his arm and let him throw the
All
ball.
right, now defensively, you mentioned the matchup with Metcalf and Gilmore, and even though Gilmore gave up his share of plays, including the big touchdown, I know this was even something that you mentioned last week about Gilmore, a little bit about Gilmore and whether or not something wrong or is he a little off. So, what do you think, Gilmore? After such a big year last year, is everything okay?
Yeah, I think everything is okay. The touchdown, you look at that play again. Basically, the Patriots play with what's called the divider rules on those types of man coverage plays, where the cornerback knows he's got safety help in the middle of the field on the post. So he's protecting about anything outside, anything underneath and outside, right? So if a receiver breaks underneath, that's on Gilmore. If he breaks on the corner route like Metcalf did, that's on Gilmore. And usually we see Gilmore in perfect position on those because he's playing off of that help in the middle of the field. This time he had the same exact technique that I've seen him play a dozen, 2 dozen times on that route. Same exact body positioning, same exact positioning throughout the stem. And then at the top of the route, for whatever reason, Metcalf just pulled away from him. It was really just from the break point on where Metcalf won that route. And it kind of cost Gilmore being able to he tried to get back into it. He was trailing at first, and then he kind of got back into it there at the end and was able to get a hand in there. But Metcalf is just so strong that he was able to hold him off. Now, outside of that, Metcalf had 3 catches for 38 yards. It wasn't a huge day for him other than the bomb. So I think Gilmore did his job. He didn't have a ton of help besides post safety help in the middle of the field against Metcalf, who's obviously one of the more talented receivers in the league and is blossoming into one of the best receivers in the league at this point. So I don't really worry too much about Gilmore or any of the downfield passing, because if it only other team that I think can replicate that is the Chiefs, maybe with Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and those guys. I think the Patriots are going to play another team other than Kansas City that's going to be able to have that same deep passing game like Seattle did. So I think they're going to be able to get that away with all that kind of stuff and be able to cover that up eventually. But the biggest question to me is at the second level of this defense. Last night I felt like Belichick was kind of caught in the middle of, if we put out their safety heavy packages that we like to run with Adrian Phillips and Terrence Brooks and Jawan Williams in the box and really playing linebacker in those roles, Seattle's going to run all over us. And they averaged almost 6 yards a carry in the first half. And that's sort of what we were seeing out of those packages. So then the Patriots they put Brandon Copeland on the field, they put Jawan Bentley on the field, and then all of a sudden Seattle started carving them up in the middle of the field in their zone coverages because they had linebackers dropping into zone depth. So it was sort of a kind of indictment, I would say, on that linebacker group that has been thin all summer, and everybody's pointed to it as a weakness and as a flaw. In week 1 against Miami, the Dolphins couldn't run the ball very well, so the Patriots were able to keep 6 and 7 defensive backs on the field and get away with it. Seattle was able to establish a running game, and then they were able to pick apart the linebackers in coverage, and that's sort of where it all came apart for New England. So eventually, at the end of the day, when you're throwing the ball in this league, it's advantage offense, right? There's no coverage that can cover everything. There just isn't. And eventually the offense is going to have a schematic wrinkle or have a receiver that's going to beat a certain type of coverage over and over again. And for the Pats, it's really been the short middle of the field, those underneath crossing routes and all those types of plays that we saw a lot of Lockett on those types of throws. That has been a big problem for them, and something that is sort of against their coverage rules and against their system is a great kind of foil of how to defeat them. So in a lot of ways, to me, I think Bill Belichick sort of says, listen, we're going to give up the shallow crossers. We're going to give up the plays in the flats. As long as we don't give up the big plays through the air, we'll be able to control the game. And last night, unfortunately, they just gave up too many big plays that a lot of those crossing routes and a lot of those flat patterns started to really eat away at
Yeah,
them.
if you look at the difference in the secondary as far as, who played more or less than week 1, the player that really had an uptick in the defensive backfield was Duggar, and
Yeah.
that's a good sign. Uh, Williams and Brooks hardly played at all after playing like 50% of the snaps week one. Jackson's snaps went down while Jones's snaps went up. And even Jason McCourty's snaps went down a bit as well. But Duggar was the one that really had a much bigger impact in week two. And that's not surprising. He's a rookie. And now that he's continuing to make plays, this is a really good sign for a top draft pick.
They need him to. I just mentioned a lot about the second level of the defense, and Duggar's a safety, and he's only about 225 pounds. So maybe he's not the linebacker answer for them, but they need another playmaker in that front
Yeah.
seven. And if he can play near the line of scrimmage and blitz the quarterback and make plays against the run and cover the flats and cover those underneath zone responsibilities when they do play zone, maybe cover some tight ends and running backs out of the backfield in man covered situations, that's what they need out of him, because they have Stephon Gilmore, they have Devin McCourty. JC Jackson, I think, was out of this game plan a little bit just because they did play a lot of zone coverage and he's more of a man coverage type of guy. So I think that was a little bit just this week in the game plan that they had for Seattle. But in general, I think what they need out of this defense is another guy that's going to be around the football.
Yep.
Somebody like Duggar who can blitz a little bit, playmakers, get around the ball a little bit and swarm to the ball, be able to make some plays on the ball and create some turnovers, to create some negative plays. They didn't have enough of that last night, especially from the linebacker level, and they're going to need more of it.
All right. And also, as far as the overall team is concerned, we mentioned, matter of fact, speaking of the linebackers, Jennings, who hasn't really played a whole lot yet so far, and Uche, who's been inactive with an injury so far, those are really the guys that if you're looking at who are our playmakers, along with Duggar, those are the guys that are eventually a year or two down the road going to have to be their playmakers, because that's why they were drafted to be those guys. They have the talent to be those types of players. But, it's real early in their careers, and it's going to take a little while, especially learning under Bill Belichick.
Yeah, what you're seeing with those guys right now is the impact of no preseason games, right? There's no preseason games to get these guys ready for the regular season. So guys like Duggar, who played a lot last night, but is sort of slowly coming along for a top pick. Somebody like Uche has been inactive because of injury mostly, but even him and Jennings and Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene and some of these rookies that they've had, Michael Onwenu, their rookie offensive lineman, has actually played the most out of everybody, and he was a 6th-round pick. So it's a lot of it to do with the lack of preseason, lack of training camp practices, and there's just not enough time to get these guys prepared. So the Patriots have leaned heavily on the veterans. But your point is well made about Uche in particular. Once he gets back, they need him to be an effective pass rusher, because right now it's Chase Winovich and it's blitzing and Belichick scheming that are getting after the quarterback. They actually pressured Russell Wilson 40% of the time on Sunday night. The problem was that it was a lot of close but no cigar, right? It was a lot of the guys closing on Russell Wilson as he's throwing the football, but we're not actually disrupting him in his flow of the game, right? So that's the biggest difference moving forward, I think, is, Winovich, he had 6 quarterback pressures on Sunday night. They did get after the quarterback, but it wasn't enough. It reminded me, and I know Patriots fans are going to scream at this, but it reminded me a ton of that Eagles Super Bowl, where they were in the backfield all night long, but they just couldn't get to Foles in time, right? He just kept on getting rid of the ball that half second before the rush closed on him. And last night, Wilson was just so dynamite under pressure that even when they had somebody in his face, if they weren't hitting him before he was throwing, then it was too late.
All right, Evan. So this week it's Las Vegas. It's a home game. So you have a West Coast team playing on a Monday night, going to Foxborough. So that's a little bit of an advantage there. The Patriots need to take advantage of. They have a better team anyway, but definitely off a Monday night game, East Coast kind of deal. And then it is off to Kansas City. So got to take care of business first with the Raiders. You definitely need to do that, because you don't want to be going to Kansas City at 1-2.
No, you don't. And the Raiders, I actually think the Raiders have an up and coming
I
roster. I'm not
agree.
saying that they're there yet, but they have the pieces, and Mike Mayock and John Gruden have been building a pretty solid draft class the last couple of years. Last draft classes, I should say. And I think they're stepping in the right direction there. But certainly, this is a very winnable game for the Patriots. They should win this game at home, and then it comes down to the big matchup against Mahomes in Kansas City in Arrowhead, which is going to be one heck of a challenge for this team to go up against a team that's basically whole from their Super Bowl run last year with a totally different offense and a totally different defense in the front seven. It's going to be a big ask.
And Chiefs play the Ravens this week, right? I
I
think that's
believe
the
so.
matchup this week, which is again maybe a good break for the Patriots. That if you're gonna play the Chiefs, you play them after they play the Ravens. So that's
Yeah.
that could be. Then again, if they lose to the Ravens, maybe that's not a good thing. But
We'll take
whatever.
it. They almost lost to the Chargers, so you never
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. How about that? Anthony Lynn says we're gonna go back to Taylor when he's healthy. I don't know if I believe
Yeah,
that.
I don't know if once Tom Brady will attest to this as
Yeah.
much as anybody. Tom was always one of those guys that refused to give the backup any reps, right? He refused to, even when he was injured, he would act like he wasn't injured just so that Jimmy Garoppolo and Jared Stidham and all these guys never got to play. And that's a big thing with Tyrod not taking any, I'm sure Tyrod has a real injury, and
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not saying
sure.
that Tyrod soft or anything like that, but to open that door to Justin Herbert, I was watching that game thinking the same thing. He's never going to give that job back.
I don't know how you do. I mean, I'm sorry, but you can be this, hey, I'm
Same thing
loyal thing,
happened
but
to Tyrod in Cleveland with Baker. Tyrod got hurt on that. Was it a Monday night game or
oh no,
something
that
like
was
that?
the he didn't get. I don't know if he got hurt or because it was against the Jets on a Thursday night. I know
Yeah,
as a Jet
primetime
fan
game.
because Taylor was terrible. And I don't know
Yeah,
if there was an injury or not, but he was playing so bad that he was taken out and Mayfield came in and the rest was history, as a
right.
Jet fan would be. But yeah, that's that's the thing is that maybe because Anthony Lynn was the coordinator in Buffalo when Taylor had his successful season, they've got a little bit of a history, a loyal history. But hey, man, if I'm the general manager and I'm the one that's deciding whether or not Anthony Lynn's got a job next year, I have to override him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Herbert looked like the real deal. I didn't expect him to look that comfortable because he got flustered at times at Oregon. Just watching him in the pre-draft process, he got flustered at times in the pocket at Oregon against college competition. To see him really be so comfortable and poised in an NFL game was impressive.
All right, Evan. So the Raiders next week, and we'll do it again on Monday, every Monday here on Pat's Pro. Appreciate it as always. Thanks a lot. CLNSmedia.com. Check it out. Your podcast is already available right now. Did you do that earlier today?
No. Podcast will come later
Later
in the
in the
week.
week.
We preview the future game instead of looking back.
Okay, excellent. Appreciate it, Evan. We'll talk to you next week.